Hi, everyone. This is Elias Martin from collectingjapaneseprints.com. Welcome to Woodblock Wednesday, where every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time from Chicago, we get together and we discuss Japanese prints, paintings, or art, culture, anything that relates to Japanese art and culture. And it's a pleasure to come back with you again this week to discuss my favorite artist. And in the last few sort of episodes, I have highlighted the work of Onchi, or Onchi Koshiro. And, Onchi, for those who do not know, Onchi was a 20th century printmaker. He arguably was the best printmaker that Japan produced in the 20th century, in my humble opinion. He was a Sosaku Hanga artist, which was different from Shin Hanga, which most of you might be familiar with. He was an artist that produced his own prints, carving out his own blocks and printing them himself. There are examples of Onchi prints that were produced for books or that were produced later by other artists because he was pretty popular, and so other artists were hired to actually print the works. But generally speaking, the Onchi prints that are in museums or in exhibition catalogs or in exhibitions you may have seen are done by the artist himself. And there's a lot of things I can talk about Onchi, and I will over time, and I'll do many videos featuring his work along with his colleagues who are working alongside with him. But I thought today would be a good point in time to sort of discuss Onchi's last prints. And it might be a weird introduction to Onchi using the last few prints he produced, but I think also is instructive of getting a sense of his artistry and really what he was about. So we'll start there, and of course there's certain themes that I'll sort of include that also are pertinent to things going on right now, particularly my upcoming seminar on self-portraits. And, last Woodblock Wednesday, I discussed a self-portrait painting by Onchi and one by Sekino, and a self-printed self-portrait by Sekino as well. So if you didn't check out that video, have a look. But I guess we're ready to start with our prints for this week. So let's go to the table and have a look. So I'll start with this work. This work was done by Onchi. It was done in 1954, and 54 was a really important year for Onchi. He was very active in that year, produced some of his most important abstract designs, some of them that are iconic and in museums. I'm fortunate enough to live in Chicago, and the Art Institute of Chicago has a wonderful collection of Onchi prints, and several are from this really important period. 1954, there was just so many that, I could show that it's one masterpiece after another. But towards the end of the year, Onchi he actually became sick, and his health was in decline, and he actually passed away the year later, 1955, and I believe it was in the spring. And so this work was done later in the year in 1954, after the really vibrant and powerful prints that were self-printed. And this work is really introspective. It's done in tonalities of gray. So basically it's all gray, other than the sheet tone, which is kind of a cream color. And what you see here is these shapes. And in the late 50s, certainly 54, but he started, earnestly working in abstraction in the early 50s. So, after the war, he really was able to explore abstraction again, especially with his work being so well received by the occupying force there. The Americans were buying his work. And so, certainly throughout the 50s, it was all abstraction for Onchi. And in this work, we have these abstracted shapes. Here's kind of a long sort of triangular shape as this. But it strikes, if you look at it, it almost mimics sort of bat wings that have been folded in onto itself. And then this form here kind of bears a resemblance to a skull. And the title of the print is called Atrophy. And, it really reflects Onchi's experience of being bedridden and being sick for some time towards the end of the year, and of course into the next, which when he died. So this work really, sort of conveys that emotion of not being able to sort of move and do the things he wants to do. Maybe his muscles or his mind or his physicality isn't there, and in this print you get a sense of it being sort of tragic, very sad, but also potent and emotional. So this Onchi work is just really, really powerful despite the very simple forms here. And again, it reflects his final illness and that struggle with his final illness. And I can just picture Onchi producing this print in between a day where he felt okay and being able to produce it and print it. This print is known in two impressions. There was one, I believe, in the Judah collection, and this is another impression. And as far as I know, there's only two. I have not been able to locate other impressions. And so the two impressions are very similar, actually. There's variations in how they're printed, but they're very, very similar. And so, I can imagine Onchi printed two of these right around the time where he was able to get out of bed and express his frustration and, and those feelings of, not feeling well. So I do think that the title Atrophy it's really fitting on this beautiful, and not conventionally beautiful, but it's still beautiful in its own way. It's very powerful work. So I'm going to zoom in so you could see the printing. You see here Onchi's stamp, Onzi, which he used quite a bit at the end of his life. You could kind of see that though they're all gray, they're different grays he used. So you see sort of the complexity of the design coming through. And this is what you get when you examine the print closely. These wonderful variations of gray where one gray is printed over the other that gives you this shape. These lines, it's really interesting. And of course, the effect is very different as I zoom out. And we again see this sort of almost like a bat wings that have been folded in this form here that looks like a skull. It's very powerful. So I'll come back to this one, but moving on to another work which is fantastic. It's a print. We have here these leaves that Onchi collected in the fall, and he picked out some really distinctive leaves. We have some ginkgo biloba leaves here, and they have this really wonderful sort of effect. You could see the veins of the leaves quite well on this printing. And as far as I can tell, this is a unique work. This part is certainly printed, and then he added these forms that almost look like worms over the leaves. And but basically, what I want to say about this is it's a very important piece. And we have above, in Onchi's own hand, a poem that I suspect he penned. And reading the poem, and and I'll translate this, and I'll read a translation that someone was very kind to translate for me. Kuwahara Sensei, who's a prominent Onchi scholar, actually translated the poem for me, and I'll share her translation. But the print with the poem suggests that it's actually Onchi's death poem. And this poem, the whole work is dated 1954. There's that Onzi stamp. And so assuming that this was done, in a time where Onchi felt okay, but he probably sensed his impending death, and he penned this poem. You can see in the writing here, the writing actually is kind of shaky. And so he might not have been all that well when he was writing it, because he has a very distinctive calligraphy that I've gotten to know. And in the writing here is very shaky. And, I just got a question from Michael Verne. He asks if the prints were printed woodblock or actual leaves. These are actual leaves, Michael. So he took these leaves and he added the pigment and impressed them onto the paper. Now this sort of form here might look like string, or it might be paper that he rolled up, as well as this. But the leaves themselves are actually printed with the leaves that he had. And it's a technique that he's done in other prints. And in another video, I covered that. There was some Gen Yamaguchi autumn leaves, as well as an Onchi. And so I encourage you to go back and look. It's the same technique that he uses in this print as in the others. And so, at this point, let me see if I can grab my iPad and read the translation so that... Okay, so here's my iPad with the Japanese basically written out. And the translation says, leaves fall on the ground and return to the ground. Humans, too, return to the ground. From the noisy surface above to the quiet underground. So it's Onchi sort of reflecting, if I could put words in this master's mouth, about just the coming and goings of the world and how noisy it is. And certainly when you're sick, the noise and the commotion of the world is not necessarily an attractive thing. And he's sort of creating a metaphor of his life, or human life, like leaves that grow on a tree. And the noise of the rustling of the leaves with the wind may be analogous to an active life. But at some point, when the season comes, the leaves do fall to the ground or return back to the earth, where the earth receives the leaves and anything else, and it's quiet. And there's this sort of solitude and of the quietness of the earth. And I could kind of see where these forms here, are almost like worm-like forms that sort of suggest the leaves being in the ground, and how the earth is taking in this offering of this life So it's really profound. You could spend a lot of time on the poem and unfolding a lot of the metaphor, the symbolism, and I'll leave that to all of you to ponder. But I just wanted to show how beautiful this printed collection of leaves are. And it's on paper, and the calligraphy is, it looks like kind of like a Sumi script on paper. And again, I'll zoom in so everyone can see. You could see how shaky the calligraphy is. I should also point out that this print, it's on paper and it's mounted to a board. It's a presentation board. It's Shikishiban, and it's a standard size board that you could find in Japan to this day. Artists sometimes draw certain things and to present as a sort of a present to a collector or to a friend. And so this was done in that way. Now, I don't know if this print was cut down to fit this Shikishiban, or if it was original, but I suspect it's original because the composition, the signature, and the way the writing is situated, it's perfectly situated on this board. And so, I want to also point out that sort of the gold around the board creates a really wonderful sort of border that the anchors the yellow, the ginkgo biloba leaves. And I'll show the verso so that people could see. If you haven't seen a Shikishiban presentation board, this is what it looks like typically. It's gold and with silver flakes. This is something you can buy in Japan to this day. As an Onchi work, I have to say that this work has a really a presence that's kind of surprising, that may not be easy to convey on a video. When you're sitting in front of this or standing and looking, there's a kind of a solemn quality to it. And this is even before I knew what the poem said. It has a sort of a reflective power to it that I also feel in this work as well. This one is actually also, it has kind of a, like, it's funny, there's these points because it does kind of jab, and it really gets a point across of possibly the frustration of the artist being bedridden for some time. And here there's a certain amount of sort of you almost kind of get the sense that the artist has sort of put these feelings away, and the feelings of acceptance and sort of being in the flow of nature is much more present here. And the last group of prints I want to show also dovetailed with the seminar that I'm about to give in Chicago. It's a seminar on self-portraits in woodblock prints. The seminar is called, what is it called? It's Block as Mirror, Woodblock as Mirror, and it's self-portraits in Japanese prints. And so here is a group of self-portraits done in 1954, and this one in particular is interesting. It's dated here in 1953 because it was done at the end of the year, but it's for the year 1954. It was done for the society. It's called Chestnut Society, and it was a group of artists that got together and to produce New Year's cards, and they would exchange them with each other, and they would also put them in books and in a beautifully bound book, and you could collect them and put them in, and all of the artists would have this collection of prints from all of the woodblock print artists of the time. And in this print, this is an Onchi self-portrait, and we have him looking in this direction. Here you see his profile. his eyes, his eyebrow, and I think like his hair. And then on this side here, you have him looking to the front. But his eyes in both portraits, or here and here, are closed. They look closed. And he has his hand up here kind of saying hello, and then the hand here that is extended to the viewer. And, I think it's really interesting. The coloration he used here is very similar to this print as well as this print. You see the gray, and you see the sort of the browns, which are on both of these prints. And so there's this theme. This is theme that is ongoing. It's unfolding. This was, again, done at the end of 1953 for the 1954 issue of the Chestnut Society. So this is certainly at that point at the end of his life. But this work was done much earlier than this, at least a year earlier. And then, of course, this one was done later. These are two other self-portraits that I thought I'd share just to give you sort of some contrast to Onchi's. This is a self-portrait by Gen Yamaguchi, and I've shared some Yamaguchi prints with all of you previously in other videos, and I encourage you to watch those videos because you could see how his work was very connected to Onchi's work. But at the same time, it had his own sort of take on it. And also there's aspects of his work that were sort of produced at the same time. So Yamaguchi and Onchi supposedly discovered or sort of started printing with found objects at the same time. So it's not something I think Yamaguchi learned from Onchi more than they were just... What he sort of learned from Onchi was his spirit of experimentation, and I think they both came to that at the same time. And in here, you see a very well articulated portion of Yamaguchi's face. And if you look him up and you look to see for a picture, and there's one on my website, by the way. So if you click on Gen Yamaguchi artist, you'll see a picture of him. This looks very well done. It looks like him. And then here he has like this check with a G, which is his signature on a lot of prints. And this check is such a trademark in his work. He would always put this sort of solid line, either a check but a line like... sort of shape that anchors the composition. So this is so Gen Yamaguchi. The composition is as much a self-portrait as this rendering of his face. And the last work I'll share is a etching by Sekino, Junichiro Sekino, also you call him a student and a disciple of Onchi. But he did his prints his own way, didn't really explore abstraction, though there are some examples where he was sort of playing around with abstraction, but his prints primarily are representational. A lot of them are portraits, and that's what really he's known for. And on here, this is a really well done likeness of Sekino, again, done in 1953 for the 1954 collection. And you could see how well articulated the etching is. So it's amazing to see the diversity of styles and printmaking techniques that would be in this collection. And here I have an example of what a Chestnut Society album would look like. This is cloth bound with a design from Takeo Take. It has a really strong mid-century modern quality to it. And, just to kind of open this book up so you could kind of see how they were bound. By the way, this is an Onchi design for this particular year. This is for 1953, so this design was done in 52 for January 1953. That's an interesting self-portrait of Senpan greeting the rising sun on New Year's Day. So anyway, that gives you an idea of where these prints come from. And, in this particular year, every single contribution was a self-portrait. And so I'll be discussing these self-portraits along with other self-portraits in Japanese woodblock prints and just generally prints coming up in Chicago. But again, to connect this late work by Onchi, I think it's a really interesting work to reflect with these two other works. So I'm going to start zooming in on these prints so you could see. Sorry for all this creaking. My floors creak. That's to keep the ninjas away, I suppose. So now I'm going to zoom out so you could see the sizes. This large gray work is much larger than the Shikishiban, and if you could kind of look towards the postcards, you could see how much larger it is versus a postcard size print. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining me. It's always a pleasure to introduce all of you to wonderful work like today's collection. It's a fantastic group of late Onchi pieces that really very powerful works that it's just a joy to share. So please join me next Wednesday for another group of prints we'll discuss. Also, please have a look on my website. My latest update went out today, and it's just an addition to the exhibition that's currently up, Bright Midnights. So they're a collection of nocturnal designs by Japanese prints throughout the actually Edo period and 20th century. So it's a nice group of diverse artists. We have Sosaku-hanga, Shin-hanga, and Edo period ukiyo-e artists are in that exhibition. And I'm also currently working on my next exhibition, which will be early to mid next month on the Yoshida family. So that will be coming up very soon, and there will be a really great collection of Yoshida prints available for sale, as well as these nocturnals. They're great as well. So have a look, and or if you have any questions about anything on my website, any of the books, or of course anything in the videos, feel free to shoot me an email. A private message would be great, or questions about the videos. You could direct your questions to the videos themselves. I'm happy to answer them in the comments. And what I'll do also is I will include the poem and the Japanese in the comments to the video so that you could explore that further if you're interested. So thank you, all of you. We'll see you soon.